Lindsay, can you hear me? Let's just start. Val, you want to chair?
Sure. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Master Plan Subcommittee agenda of Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:34. If everyone will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll hand it over to our town planner, Bart.
Hi, Bart. Town planner. Today we're here to have a discussion kind of on a build-out analysis and really just identifying the parameters in which we want the analysis to take place. So that'll be our main discussion, focal point for this evening, and then afterwards we'll have a discussion on survey questions. At the end of the month, we're going to finalize our survey questions to be sent out, hopefully the first week of June. So we want to get some opinions on those, and especially those chapters that we haven't spoken about yet. And then after that, we'll just do a couple updates on where we are with different drafts and processes related to different chapters. And then we'll kind of set up the table for the June meeting, or whenever we meet next, discuss what we'd like to accomplish then. So, as I first mentioned, our first topic of discussion is identifying parameters for our community viz. I guess you would say program. It's a mapping program, it's a fiscal program, I guess, as well. Helps us create different scenarios based on how we would envision the town grow. So what areas we want to preserve, what areas we'd like to see maybe some more density, and we're trying to tweak the dimensions to help us understand what is possible based on infrastructure, potentially support from traffic, our roadway systems, and whatnot. So to help us through that discussion, we have some consultants from SRPC, Stratford Regional Planning Commission. We have Jackson Rand, who's the GIS coordinator there. He's going to be helping us lead that discussion and help us understand this program a little better and guide us through that process. And then with him is Carl Pimental. He's a assistant director at SRPC. He's here to help us with the next focus with the survey questions and other updates. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Jackson up here to help us get some parameters.
Thank you. So I don't know most of you, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Jackson Rand. I'm the Senior GIS Planner at SRPC. So right now I'm leading everything that has to do with maps for the Newmarket Master Plan, including the build-out analysis using Community Viz. I put this little packet in front of each of you. It has a couple of resources I'm going to talk about. The page on top is a quick resource guide to what Community Viz is, and I will run through all of this and explain it in more detail. There's also a land use map and a zoning map for the town of Newmarket in this packet. So before I get into the details, is everybody aware of what a build-out analysis is, or should I back up and give an overview of what build-out analyses are?
I'm good.
Good?
Maybe Jackson for our folks at home.
Okay. So a build-out analysis is a way to conceptualize what your community could look like in the future in terms of housing developments and commercial developments. So there's a bunch of inputs we put into this tool, and what gets spit out is a map of your town representing what it could look like in the future. It'll place points on the map where residential structures could be constructed, and really just gives an overall representation of where development is likely to occur given what your current zoning ordinance states. So what we do with our build-out analyses is the first one that we do is called a base scenario or an existing conditions scenario. So we take your current zoning ordinance as it's currently written. We take a GIS data layer of all of the existing buildings that are currently on the ground in the town of Newmarket, and we input certain data on areas where development absolutely cannot occur. And so, for example, that would be conservation lands. We don't develop on conservation lands. Water, we don't develop on water. Wetlands, we don't develop on wetlands. So those are some of the things that goes into the tool and tells the tool, do not build any residential properties in this area. So the first build-out analysis we're going to do as part of this project is that base scenario and existing conditions. And what that'll show you is if nothing in your zoning ordinance changes, here's where you're going to see development in the future, and here are the types of development you're going to see there in the future. And that gives us a baseline of how to continue this conversation moving forward, and what you do like in those patterns of development and what you don't like in those patterns of development. And from there, we test out alternative scenarios to see how we can change those patterns of development if they are not what you wanted or expected to see. Does all of that make sense so far? Awesome. So we're going to start running that base scenario analysis fairly soon. There's nothing that we need from the town because that's, as I said, it's based on the current zoning ordinance. So we'll just pull some of the data out of your zoning ordinance, plop it into the tool, and it'll give us a map showing your patterns of development for residential and commercial properties into the future. From there, we'll have a more detailed discussion of what you like, what you don't like, and what you want to see changed. But for now, I'm here to give you an overview of what types of things we can change in this analysis to get you to start thinking about what you might want to see changed for these alternative scenarios. So some of those things include minimum lot size. I'm also going to give a couple examples in this discussion. We've done this community-based build-out analysis in several of the communities in the SRPC region. One of the big things that's come up that we've found in these build-out analyses is that towns have seen their existing conditions analysis that I was just talking about. And the towns see that they are going to reach their maximum build-out a lot sooner than they thought they were going to. And so one big change that we've been making in a lot of municipalities for the alternative scenarios is decreasing minimum lot sizes so that they can continue to develop further into the future. I won't name town names because we're in the middle of the project, it's not final, but one of the towns we're doing this for, they're going to hit full build out in 2031 if nothing changes. So they found that to be very alarming and very problematic. And so what they decided to do with their alternative scenario was significantly reduce minimum lot sizes to open up more land potential for development so that their build out doesn't happen until much further down the road. So minimum lot sizes is a big thing we can change for our alternative scenarios. We can also change the zoning districts. We can remap what zoning looks like in the town just for a hypothetical analysis. And we can change just small parts of the zoning. So if there is, maybe a single family residential district next to a multifamily residential district, and you want to take that multifamily district and extend it a little bit further into a neighborhood that would be very applicable for multifamily, we can change the boundaries of those zoning districts in the tool and see what that would turn into in the future, or what that could turn into in the future. So we can make small changes to zoning boundaries, or we can totally redraw the zoning boundaries for the town, for the purpose of this analysis. Those are the two biggest things that we've seen municipalities change for their alternative scenarios. But we can also change information like building setbacks, front setbacks, rear setbacks, and side setbacks. We can change maximum building heights, so number of stories that a building can be built, if that is something that's in your zoning ordinance. We can also change the number of dwelling units per structure as well. We can change single-family districts to multifamily districts. We can change multifamily districts to single-family districts. There is a lot we can change in these scenarios. And everything that I'm explaining right here, all these potential changes are all listed out on the first page of the Community Viz Analyses guide that I gave out to everybody.
But the key to this, though, is your base land use map, correct? And I think I'm seeing tax lots
It's the
overlaid.
zoning districts map is the base to this.
But you need to exempt, for instance, places that are already built out, or places that are in conservation. So I think the key is first getting the land use map correct, because I'm looking at it thinking, this is just not correct. So how do we go about making sure that you have, the right data?
So are you saying that the land use map I have in front of you is incorrect?
At 100%.
Okay, so that land use data does not go into this tool. What is going to go into this tool is conservation lands.
Right, so that's not represented here 100%.
Yeah, conservation lands are not represented on the land use map. That's
No, so
correct.
my point being is that if you say, when you do your analysis, for instance, as to rezoning maybe the rural residential, okay, and if you're showing lots on there that are available for development, but in reality they're not because they're under conservation, your outcome will not be correct.
Correct, but were you going to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say, we have a map of all the conservation lands in the open space plan, and we've given Jackson all the updated information as much as we know, so we could share that, you could share that with
Yeah,
this group maybe, because you might wanna look at it to see if we've got it right.
well, I mean, because obviously.
Well,
like,
it's not reflected on the land use map. It's a separate
Okay.
map.
Correct.
Yeah.
The land use map that I provided was just, like, this land use data does not get inputted into the Community Viz tool.
It does not.
The land use data, the land use map that I handed out was just kind of to start conversation, to brainstorm about
Okay.
things that you like and dislike within the town.
So you have a separate map that goes into an analytical tool that will identify all of the correct lots that are under conservation or areas, as well
Correct.
as build out that is to date.
Correct.
Okay. And then does it also encompass any existing approvals that are already
It can.
permitted?
It can.
Our map doesn't have that.
Okay, no, but the tool.
Yes, it
So
can.
we can take the list of approvals that are not yet built and then correlate those as well, because
Yep.
that will have an
would be
impact
helpful,
on as
yeah.
to, how much more housing do we need? And I'm assuming you're using the census surveys to determine perhaps what kind of housing that we will need in X number of years?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And for the permitted and future housing, if there is anybody who would be able to provide us with a spreadsheet of where those housing developments are and how many units there are, we can get that incorporated into the tool
Yeah.
for sure.
Because we have a few hundred units that are permitted and not built.
Mhm.
130?
Bart, do you want us, because I don't have the emails of this whole group, maybe send them our maps from the open space plan, because it's got the protected lands map.
That would be great.
Is there a question over here?
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. I'm just curious,
what other assumptions or criteria you're utilizing, and if you're also considering any other limitations, like any restrictions with water or, solid waste or sewer, so, and like building setbacks, wetland setbacks, if you are assuming like a certain percentage for impervious surface, like for roadways and things like that.
Yeah, so a couple of answers there. There is what's called constraints to development that go into this tool. And constraints to development, some obvious ones are conservation lands. You can't build on conservation lands. Water, we can't build on water. But we will be asking for your input on what else you would like to see in those constraints to development. So if you have specific municipal wetland buffers where you cannot build within a certain distance of wetlands, we can incorporate that into the constraints to development. We do put impervious surface into constraints to development. Kind of. We do some analysis on that data before it gets put into the tool, because just because land is impervious doesn't mean we can't build there.
No, but I mean, for like roadway access, you have a large lot, someone's gonna do a subdivision or site plan, and you have to assume a certain percentage for road access and, drainage and all that.
Yep, so unfortunately, Community Viz can't take that into consideration. The build-out analyses that come out of Community Viz are much more high level to show where development is going to be occurring in town. Does that answer your question?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
What is that, like, what is it based upon? Like the determination of where build-out's gonna happen?
Say that again?
Like, so what does Community Viz use? Is it AI? Is it like, how is it like making the determination as to whether there's an assumption based on land use, what other, like, and where it's gonna be built, in zoning, where it's gonna be built out?
A lot of math and statistics that is far above my head.
Okay. But like historical data, like in similar communities or whatnot, must go, like, I'm just trying to figure out. It's not like a magic box, there's gotta be something.
Yeah, so I put in the zoning district data, GIS data.
Yeah.
And for each zoning district, I tell the tool what is and is not allowed to be built in that district. Are you allowed to build single family in this district? Are you allowed to build multifamily in this district? Are you allowed to build commercial in this district? I also input what all of the setbacks are, front setbacks, side setbacks, and rear setbacks, if they exist, and what minimum lot sizes are for every zoning district. I also input a layer for existing buildings so that the tool knows not to build a building where a building is already there. The tool then takes the parcel data layer for the town, looks at all the parcels that have been built and all the parcels that have not been built on, and it takes all that information, consolidates it all together, and then places points down on the map where new residences could be constructed in the future.
What about required frontage?
That unfortunately is not something that Community Viz can handle.
Yeah, see, that's a problem, and that's why sometimes build-out analysis are a little bit off. I mean, I'm just, as a quick story, so during our visioning and our public session, there was a map, and people were circling where they thought people should build.
Yep.
So they circled my backyard, and it's right downtown here, it's landlocked. You can't build on it unless I found frontage. But that's a downtown spot, and it looks like, oh yeah, let's put apartments there or something, but you can't get there from here.
Yep.
So that's why I'm asking the question, and
Yeah.
I
Yes.
I wonder if, though, there's a conversation, if there weren't any frontage requirements for a certain area, and maybe it'd be more accurate. If you allow for zero frontage.
then you have access issues, of course.
Potentially.
Yeah, but I think you're also thinking about building a specific type of building, because you could have the shared driveway, assuming you can get to behind your house, through by the side of your house, to be able to develop that.
or certainly a house can be purchased and a road put in,
Right,
which Newington just did that.
yeah.
It happens if there's no
Yeah, no,
land
it
back.
Yeah.
does happen.
But I think what the point being is that the data is going to show buildable areas as to land mass, as far as unbuilt land, doesn't have a house, doesn't have conservation land, et cetera, or or wetlands. So there's potential building there. Someone could buy your house, and if the zoning allowed a 32-unit apartment building, that could be there, if the zoning allowed it. And I'm saying that you're using these scenarios to run different scenarios, right? To
this
say,
isn't
we
gonna be
want high density in town, how many units per acre?
Or does it take in consideration, for example, steep slopes?
Right, I think we have to recognize the limitations of this as well, based on what it has. So I think we want, like Jackson said, take it at a higher level. This is an opportunity potentially for this area to have, more development. But it's not gonna be like very accurate. That's just more investigation for us. So it's kind of like an area we recognize as a potential growth
Macro?
area. Yeah, macro. This could be a growth area. And then, all right, then theoretically, maybe this many units could be there. And then more devils in the detail once we, investigate it further.
Well,
So I'll just add to what Bart said, and I think that a tool like this is meant to not be used at the parcel level, because it's not that it's not accurate, but to your point, Sylvia, that level of specificity per parcel, it's not going to translate perfectly. But I think if you step back and look at generally, where are areas in town where you're most likely to see development based on your current regulations and the existing conditions, it will give you a sense of like, what is your town potentially going to look like under that sort of highest level scenario, and what can you do as a town to tweak things if you want to, and how that would impact where development could change and where it could move to. So I think when I look at a program like this, I look at it as high level planning, not necessarily at the parcel level, but a guide for where do you want to start to direct more development. I think that is the most useful application to this. I think if the expectations are going to be, well, this parcel here we can't develop because it's got no frontage, or that that the access is off of a different road and that person has an easement, like you're going to have to take a step back a little bit, because it's not going to provide that level of specificity.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the open space planning process, which we're getting to the end of, is to identify conservation focus areas. So where do we want to go forward in terms of any land conservation?
Mm-hmm.
So how does this take that into consideration? Because presumably some of the places that we might identify that are in one of the maps you'll get from the coastal plan shows one way of identifying those. Some of them are going to be the remaining big parcels of land.
Mm-hmm.
So presumably this is going to show, hey, you can put a ton of houses on that land. So how do we use that in terms of what you're going to come up with in terms of we may be identifying those as conservation areas?
Yeah, so as of right now, those focus areas for the future for conservation, those obviously are not conservation lands right now. So this tool is going to say build a bunch of houses there. If you were to identify your conservation focus areas in town before we run this analysis, we could run this analysis and say like, hey, these actually are conservation lands, even though they're not. Just to say like, in the future they might be conservation lands, so let's not build there and let's see what the build out looks like if we were to conserve that land.
So that could be a scenario, one of the scenarios we run next time or whatever. I don't know what the timeline of this. What's sort of the
Absolutely.
timeline of this whole process?
Do you know?
I don't know the time. I mean, I think that the first thing that we're going to do is that base, and I think that's going to happen relatively quickly. I
Mhm.
think then determining what the two scenarios, 2 or 3 or whatever is what we have in the budget for this, that is going to come after that. So I don't know exactly the timing for that, but I would say over the course of the next couple of months is what we would be working with this group and with Bart to fine tune what inputs you want to start to create those different scenarios.
Well, and I think to your point, Ellen, it's, you're right, you know, the open space plan is identifying, you know, conservation or lands of interest to conserve. And I think by running this scenario, it might prioritize some of these, you know, given that the build-out scenario might be directed, you know, significantly towards some of
Puts the
them.
pressure on those, yeah.
You know, and then the, you know, then, you know, the public can weigh in.
Yeah, and
as
the
to-
landowner themselves weighs, right?
Well, that
We don't-
too,
you're gonna-
you
Yeah,
know.
right. Yeah, so we're hopefully working on this tomorrow night at our meeting, so
Okay.
we might be able to, I don't know what if we do, or this group looks at it, or the planning board, I don't know what the process is of, maybe you can
So I
tell us.
think what would be good for conservation is to identify those lands, you know, that you want to prioritize maybe conserving or not see development directed towards.
Mhm.
So that's why that initial analysis is going to be great to see under current
Mhm.
conditions what can happen.
Mhm.
Then from there, you can make recommendations for the future, you know, the build analysis that we want to see. And then go from there. And then, you know, kind of go through an iterative process until we finalize the parameters under different scenarios.
Okay,
I think we get 2 or 3. You know, one, current conditions, and then 2 more scenarios after
Mhm.
that.
so we do have setbacks for wetlands and prime wetlands, so those will be
That's
incorporated?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
I
Well,
just want
what-
to jump back to your question really quickly. One of our more rural communities that we did this community visit analysis for, what we found in the base scenario based on existing conditions was that there were a lot of new developments created on the outskirts of this rural town. And we presented those results to the town. They were very surprised and they were very unhappy. They wanted most of their development to happen in more of the downtown core and keep the outskirts of town less developed to preserve community character. And so what we ended up suggesting to them was decreasing minimum lot sizes in the downtown. And what we found when we ran the next scenario was that all of the new developments were existing in the downtown area and not the outskirts of town. So it's a much higher level analysis to just see general themes and patterns of where development could occur in the future.
And when you run through I think this is something, I don't know if you have looked at it, but with the wetland buffers and then relative to the zoning, that's going to drive where buildings get put, but under the open space plan, the buffer doesn't drive the actual density. And we've kind of learned that the hard way.
Mm.
Because the buffers are included in the ability to have density.
Good point.
So you might want to run it both ways.
Do you also, and it must be maybe a separate phase, review the infrastructure that's available in those areas? Or do you then look at that after and then say you have to build that infrastructure?
Such as like roads, water, sewer, that kind of thing.
Those would be the top 3 I could think of.
Yeah, so that does not come, the community viz tool does not do that.
Mhm.
We, after the fact, could do a little bit of that, but we only have so much ability when it comes to confirming or denying the availability of that infrastructure.
Understood.
And we certainly don't have the ability to do any sort of like cost estimating for increasing infrastructure.
Thank you.
Let's ask a question. So you do the build-out analysis.
Yep.
Do you do like the baseline one and then like present that, and then we're like, okay, what happens if you pull this lever, this lever, this lever, and this lever, and then you do those scenario analysis? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, so the idea right now is just to convey what can be changed in the alternative scenarios. We're not necessarily looking for what you want the alternative scenario to look like, because we want to be able to present the base scenario to you. So we'll run the base scenario based on existing conditions. We'll present it to you all, and you either won't be surprised or you'll be really shocked. You either will be happy with what you see or not happy with what you see, and then we'll talk about what we can change to make it look like what you want it to look like in the future.
And under the budget, we have 2, maybe 3
I
of
believe so.
those
Yeah.
scenarios.
Alternative scenarios. So you'll have the base scenario based on existing conditions, plus 2 more.
Okay.
With that being said, we will look to see if there is interest in running more than that, we can look to see what the cost will be. It may just be an added cost of the town, if you so choose, if you want an additional scenario or 2, we can give you what that price would be to run those. But I think in our agreement, we had said the base scenario plus 2 only.
And once we see the base, we can figure out,
Right, that's
you
what I
know,
was,
whether
the
the
genesis
committee
of
or
my
whatever level to say, these are the parameters we want you to change. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jackson, or any other information you want to convey?
No, but I just want to, I was thinking about the land use map again. If you look at that, I think the confusing part is in the legend. At the top, it says conservation lands, but they're not actually on the map. So the
Right.
green is actually agriculture. So that's why it looks like, I don't think conservation lands are shown on that map, so maybe that probably shouldn't be on the legend. But anyway, so the color, the green is mostly the agriculture. So if you think about where the kind of grasslands are, that's what's showing up as agriculture.
You are correct. That conservation lands that's listed in the legend
Yeah.
is the green that you're seeing outside of Newmarket, not within
Right,
Newmarket.
right, I see what you,
So you're defining like all the, let's say, the Popove or the smart
Yeah.
properties as
it's a state,
as agriculture or forest.
it's a state lands data. It's
even
not
though
very
like-
particularly
that's why I was
accurate.
wondering what
Yeah.
was driving it.
Yeah. The one thing I like about this map, it's the only thing I like about it. I mean, it's not your map, because it's your map. It's just because I don't think it shows, it doesn't show some of the stuff, but it really shows where the development is. That yellow really pops out, so you can really see where the subdivisions are, and then where the development is in town. That, I think, is kind of useful from this map. The
Absolutely.
rest of the land cover is, it's not particularly, so, yeah. Anyway, that was kind of an aside, but I thought that was important to
Thank you.
get people's head around that.
We're good?
Does anyone else have any other questions about build out?
Everyone's good?
So we'll get started on running the base scenario existing conditions one fairly soon. We should have some sort of results to show you guys within a couple weeks probably. And then we'll reconvene at some point to discuss your thoughts and feelings about the first build out and what you want to see changed in the next one.
And then your zoning districts are they actually mimicking our R1, R2, M1, et cetera?
That's a bit confusing, yeah.
That is, this should, maybe if you can put on the legends what our actual districts are,
Okay.
because this looks more like, yeah, it would be better
could
to
be
match it to
confusion
the existing zoning. And Art can help you with that,
I'm
Yeah, we can do
confused.
that.
yeah. Because we don't really, right, okay, you know what I'm saying. Okay, Kyle, do you have anything?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If
very
any
much.
questions come up you have for me, feel free to send me an email or give me a call.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're good on that? You're good? Okay. Team updates?
Yeah, so we'll
Bart?
go with, it's kind of a late addition, but I think right now what we're gonna do is, you should have in front of you questions for our next survey that we're planning. Does everyone have that sheet?
Mm-hmm.
So what this discussion is we're going to review the questions that we have drafted so far, and then maybe touch upon some of the blanks as well that we don't have any questions for. So Kyle's going to help us run through all that, and then we'll just go through and maybe edit comments on any of these, and so we can just really start to fine tune what we are going to ask the community moving forward. So. Hand over to Kyle.
Sure, thanks, Bart. So, what you have in front of you is really some high-level ideas. The only group so far that has started to kind of really tailor their questions is the energy group. So if you look on that first page, those energy questions, Lindsay and the Energy Committee has kind of been working through those. So those, I would say, are a little bit further along than any of the other sections. What our sort of goal is that this survey that will go out will encompass all of these other remaining chapters. So we want to have at least somewhere around 3 questions per topic area or per chapter. And so, what we're looking for from this group is some ideas on any of these remaining chapters, some high-level thoughts of like, hey, there's something really, a burning question that hasn't been asked yet, that we are really looking for information from the public on where that might fit into one of these categories, or even if it's something that's completely separate that you feel is really important that needs to be asked. That's the type of feedback that we're looking for now, and we can share this with Bart electronically to get this to you so we can solicit some additional feedback since it's the first time you're seeing it. But we wanted to get some rough ideas. Like I said, the energy ones are, I think, the furthest sort of along. Recreation were some ideas that the lead writer for that is working in, and he's working with, is it Amy? Amy, the rec director. Our transportation planner, Colin, has started to come up with some potential ideas of what transportation-related projects. And then our economic development person, Natalie, was starting to brainstorm some economic development questions. So I know, Val, you might be interested on the economic development side and what, some ideas that you might have. And so I'll stop there and just say, just generally, do you have some thoughts on the direction that we're going, and if you've got any sort of high-level questions that you think would be really important for us to consider including?
Just one quick thing regarding some of the energy questions. I think you need to include what is the investment into looking at those options. If it's going to cost the town X amount of money to hire someone to go out and look at energy audits, or does the town have to invest money into understanding energy generation projects? So everyone's going to say, yeah, but then they'll be like, oh, I didn't know it was going to cost, $20,000. I think those need to be clearer.
I mean, that's true for absolutely
Everything.
anything.
Well, that's my point, though.
Right.
If we address that now, then when the other questions come in, we'll at least have a format to think about, like recreation. Everyone might want to have pickleball courts, but it's going to cost X amount of money. Just the investment into looking at it as opposed to the actual construction of it.
Well, it's like saying, do you support, the town acquiring land for conservation? And 90% of the people are going to say yes.
Right.
If you say, do you support the town acquiring land for conservation, and you're going to pay $1, per thousand on your tax rate to do that,
Exactly right.
how are they going to answer that? You're not going to get 90% saying yes. So to your point, Jane, everything is, I think most of planning is relative to the financial impact that it has.
Right.
And are we doing this in a vacuum when you don't consider that?
Yeah, that's a good point. And we'll have to try and figure that out, because I think that it will be difficult to kind of try and put a specific cost to every question, but I do think that there are financial components, and that if you just answer it in sort of a visionary, then, like you said, it's sort of like a leading question. It's like, of course someone's going to want it.
Right.
It sounds like a
Yep.
great idea.
Right.
But if you try to bring it forward, is it actually going to be supported if it's going to be...
Right, maybe that's the question,
Right.
Would you support this if it cost you, or what, a range of money, or?
Since I was involved in drafting the energy questions, I mean, you could also look at it the other way. We can't calculate how much money potentially people would be saving. We're not asking that question either, or showing that information as well. Almost all of these result in the ratepayer seeing a decrease in their cost for energy, right? So, no, we can't capture all of the economic benefit or cost in the question perhaps.
But maybe that's the question, that's a
But
question.
nothing's- Yeah, nothing is entirely free, but some things have a benefit to them as well.
I wonder if there's a way to like just generally phrase, I'm sure you've done this a million times, right? Like in the opening of it, right? Like just to help people get the frame of like, there's an economic, there'd be like a tax impact and potential economic benefit to many of these, right? Like
Right.
they're not calculable. We can't calculate every single one of these
Right.
costs, right?
But is that a general question?
Yeah, just some
Right.
sort of framing so people have that in their head when they're answering the question. So it doesn't become a, I say yes to everything, as much as a, I prioritize this as an important investment for the community.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a really important way of framing
Right.
it, is about a prioritization.
I'm wondering, looking at the energy questions, I can see that they're very well thought out, but I like your idea of sort of, and you may have already thought of doing something like this, is just having sort of a paragraph that introduces that particular topic. And so maybe it would say here, the Energy Committee's objective is to save Newmarket taxpayers payer money on their tax bill by looking for, energy efficiencies. And here are some, something, this is off the top of my head, but sort of that provides that objective so we understand where the questions are coming from. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard because there's so many things that are hard to predict down the road. Like, right, we're now part of the community electrical program, so we will be generating a surplus, which we will then be allowed to, at some point, reinvest in the town. So some of these may not come at a cost to the individual town. They will be paid by the surplus we collect from being part of community power. So there's just a lot of things that we can't predict in the future as well on these. It's really hard to like price out things when you don't know. The same could be said for generation of power. That could be entirely paid for by an investor, and there's no tax dollars paid at all. So it's really hard to predict the cost of these things, whether we see the continuing decrease in power generation and power storage that we're seeing now. If you were to project that out, there's just so many factors.
Is there any way to even say, one of the questions would be, would you be willing to invest
Right.
in the following solution with a possible return on the town's investment
Yeah.
into it? Because that does cover, to your point, we don't know, we may make a ton of money, we may make a little money back, who knows, but with the possibility of there being a return on the investment.
I think it's also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, certainly some things have no return on investment, whether it's a park or conservation, dollar-wise.
Right. Yep.
And it's so hard at this level. This is almost like a wish list, and then a fiscal analysis would have to come later when you have the specifics of the individual program.
So, my children are circling things in the Amazon catalog for Christmas. They circle literally everything.
Right.
Pretty close to the holiday, it starts being like, okay, what out of here do you really
Yeah,
need?
yeah.
Right?
Start
Like,
ranking.
so
Right.
it starts becoming like, what out of here? Yeah, everything's, there's nothing here for someone to be like, this is awful, why would we do
Frankel,
this?
yep.
But what do you really want? And that's what we're trying to get, right? The
Yep.
understanding with the community.
Right.
Highly
A
prioritized.
weighted scale.
What you want the
Weighted
community investing or what you're willing to invest in.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and to Phil's point, I think some kind of general disclaimer or intro to this, whether or not it's per category or at the beginning, we don't want to make it too long so people are reading too much. But if there's a way to sort of provide some context about what we're really looking for, because what we don't want is to just put a survey out there that you already know the answers to. That like, yes, people are going to want to support this, but we have to tailor the question in a way. It's like, all right, we're asking you to either prioritize some of these things or recognize, are you going to support them if there is a financial component that comes before the town council or whatever. There may be a way that we can put that in some kind of disclaimer to give participants some context, that it's not just a wish list of like, yes, of course, I support all these things, to make them really think about, okay, I have to kind of set some priorities of what I really want. And I guess we'll have to kind of figure that out. I know that there's,
Well,
I've, go ahead, Val.
and I don't really need to interrupt, but, is one of your choices depends on the economic cost, investment or benefit.
Right.
Because somebody could answer, I would strongly agree, but it depends, right? So is that one of the choices? It
Wouldn't we
really
all-
just
wouldn't we all
depends.
I
check
would
that one?
circle that one for everything.
I think we would all say that.
But some people might not. Some people might say,
Yeah.
well, it doesn't matter what the cost is, this is what
It's good for the environment, I don't
This is what I
care.
want,
Yeah.
you
Gotta
know?
do it.
This is
Yeah.
my
Like that, like that.
philosophy.
I wonder if it's,
Think
oh,
like
sorry.
that. I think
Okay.
we want to think high level, like what are our values? What do we want to see? We all understand we live by cost in this world, so I think that Kyle's point that we can do that. Maybe we do like a short little intro video that explains that right above the link, or a disclaimer paragraph, just something that does explain like that. I like that idea, but something that just sets the table. It's like, look, this will be vetted, but big picture, what do you want to see? Do you agree with these questions or not? So we're just trying to figure out, where do we pursue investments? We're prioritizing what the community wants. So I think that's what we're trying to get at. Are we prioritizing the right items?
I wonder, and again, we don't have to get into the details of survey construction, but like if it's built into the Likert, right, into the descriptors on the Likert, right? Like, is it strongly agree, disagree, or is it like highly prioritize, like medium priority, low priority, right? Like something that lets people, this is a really high priority for this community.
Yeah, that's a good idea, a
Yeah,
prioritization schedule as
prioritization.
That is
opposed
a good
to,
idea. So instead of
your opinion.
agreeing with it or not agreeing it, is it a higher priority, or we still want this, but maybe this is down the road?
Right.
yeah, that's a good
I think
idea.
that would help
Yeah.
every committee too, when you're formulating these
Right.
questions.
Yep.
To prioritizing. You have that kind of with recreation. This might have come from the city of Rochester's,
Yeah, I saw.
number 11. But just some overarching, I really, just as someone who does this a lot, I think open-ended questions should be very limited. It just isn't, it's agony to try to analyze that. The other thing is, when reading some of these questions, I'm not sure what the outcome is meant to be. I don't know how this might help the community and knowing how many people are teleworking part of the week or all of the week. I don't know how that adds to a transportation plan. So some of these I'm not quite understanding, and I just think we need to, as a group, ask ourselves, what, at the end of the day, how will these questions
Right.
help guide the master plan? And, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, like these were just some ideas to get the conversation started. And I would appreciate that type of feedback. We'll share this electronically so you can sort of comment on individual questions or sections or questions that you think are relevant. Yeah, I think we just wanted to have something for you to react to.
So like, you're not looking for specific feedback to each question right now?
No, not
No,
necessarily.
so I guess the follow-up will be, Bart will get this out to all of us, and we can provide comments
And I don't
from
know if
that, any suggestions.
I don't know if it's me as a school board representative here, or we need to talk to the school, but I think the recreation, if we are only talking to Amy,
Yeah,
like, we're missing an opportunity. There are other facilities that the taxpayers in this community are paying for that we should consider. School's talking about, do we want to build a track? I feel like it's a great opportunity to understand what the community thinks.
or other recreational
Right.
organizations in town, so that we're
That's
hitting them all.
The, one other thing, often we see these days, communities that have at least one chapter on age-friendly communities or age-friendly elements. So whether it's for young families or a mom with a stroller, or it's with, families where there's someone who's has a disability issue, or it's older adults who also want to have recreation opportunities or whatever it is. It's good to have a sort of that filter, that age-friendly filter, and we've had a lot of success with that with several communities.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I know that when we did the cultural and arts and recreation, some of the work in Dover, age-friendly, how older people are using parks differently, was actually really interesting to hear. That a lot of people tend to think, oh, it's a park, it's a playground, it's for kids. A lot of older people are also using those parks in a totally different way. And so that was, that's a really good point, to just making sure that that lens of age-friendliness is considered.
What would be questions around future land use versus
So-
all these other categories that we have?
Yeah, my immediately thought was to go to what's still outstanding on our vision and objectives from our 2015, right? Because there's still things that we haven't pursued or been able to that are still valid, and to revisit that, to see if they still apply.
Okay.
You know,
Did we get that somewhere along the way? I mean, I know it's
Yes.
in somewhere, but.
So you want to go to the vision? Future
Yeah,
land use
because
style?
there'll be a lot of changes in my perspective of the future land use chapter, but there will be if you go to the economic development chapter. Because I think there's a lot of things in the existing future land use chapter that are just still so applicable. They're like timelessly applicable.
The other thing that's interesting
And we haven't, sorry,
Go ahead.
and we haven't moved them
Reached those.
forward. We haven't moved anything forward to achieve those goals.
So would the questions be around those? Do people still support those? Is that what the questions would be in the survey? I guess that's
I
what
think it would be interesting to know if they're still priorities. And then to think of, well, are there other new priorities since that time, just because of changes in demographics or the outcomes from the build-out analysis? Something as simple as, do you support, rural development versus more urban infill or higher density infill? Because there's more costs associated with rural.
Right.
And people might say, I don't want more people downtown. It's, I can't drive through it now. I can't park anywhere. So we don't know.
So, Val, just going back to your point, you want to ask kind of similar questions, because we really haven't achieved as much.
Yeah, we have lots of goals in there,
Yeah.
and we've achieved several. But I think it's worthwhile to, instead of sitting here thinking about reinventing the wheel, well, gee, what do we have on the books now? What
Right.
still applies? And do we want to get, public input on that?
But it would also be interesting, Kyle, to hear your group's thoughts on looking at that and saying, okay, here's what we had previously in our master plan for and with your knowledge of the area and the overall planning in this region, does this make sense that these things didn't happen? When we look at these, we're, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or, oh no, maybe if you guys had taken some different steps, you would have seen more of these things because other communities did, or something like that. That might be helpful as well to kind of just get another set of eyes towards that.
So you're saying like almost look at sort of like an audit of the recommendations and see, all right, if some of these hadn't been moved forward, in addition to are they still relevant, is there a reason why they didn't
Exactly.
get moved forward?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Or in general, maybe some data that you guys sort of would explain that, like, oh, well, the communities in general moved away from this kind of development or this kind of activity, and so that probably explains why that didn't happen.
Yeah, so just some of the topics around climate change, so shoreline and water quality protection measures, stormwater management standards, open space design, flexible subdivision methods, property maintenance code, looking into that, junkyards, looking into that. Then modification, zoning modification for economic development, specify zones for that.
kind of just taking a look at what was recommended, back at this time, what's relevant, what got moved forward, and Patrick, to your point of, were there outside conditions? Did trends change? Was there something in the development community that just shifted? Was there something in your regulations that wasn't allowing for that to happen as a goal? A good example of that is, a lot of communities, probably early 2000s, put in the cluster subdivisions ordinances. Some communities, they really did well with open space subdivisions. Other communities, you saw almost none, but it was all how they drafted the ordinance. And some of them were too strict in that they couldn't make the numbers work. A developer couldn't make it economically feasible to do because it was too stringent. But the communities that did really well, they were more flexible. So that's an example of, you could say like, well, this was a goal. If your community if it didn't happen, it may be because your regs didn't allow for it to happen. So that might be something for us to look into.
That's a great case in point, because there's some open space developments that wouldn't have happened here if they were part of an ordinance, if some specifics were in the ordinance that we weren't actually able to waive in the subdivision site plan. It would have been more cost effective for somebody to carve up the entire parcel than to do an open space. So there were lots of waivers granted in order to be able to have that developer do the open space.
And I remember looking, when we did the existing land use, there were quite a few open space subdivisions in Newmarket. And I think when we compared that to Durham, there weren't many in Durham at all. And I think when we looked at the regulations, that Newmarkets and Durhams were very, very different. And so that, again, could just be sort of like, with the Planning Commission, because we deal with multiple communities, we could give you a general sense, of some examples like that if we look through it. So that's a good idea. And we might be able to, from that, we might be able to come up with a couple of questions based off of that.
Okay, so next step is Bart will get this to us.
Yeah, we'll get this to Bart. We'll make sure that we get rid of the city of Rochester.
And Bart, then you'll just feed this to the other committees for their input, like Patrick has.
Yes, I'll
Okay. Are we moving to C?
So I guess updates.
Team updates.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to give an update on the.
Oh, okay.
Sure, so we, guess I don't, so we're closing in on a draft of the open space plan. Autumn, who was our Stratford regional person, she departed, so Bart and I have been working on the draft, and we have a draft we sent out to the commission, which we're gonna, they got it yesterday, so whether they look at it before tomorrow night, they may not, but we're gonna give them a hard copy, and so they'll have time to mark it up and look at it and review it. And two of the things we want to do tomorrow night, we're going to look at the conservation focus area map that the coastal plan has. So it's be one of the maps that you get in that packet that I think Bart's going to send. So we're going to look at that and say, and maybe the wildlife action plan map, and say, do we like those as priorities? Are those good focus areas, or do we want to identify more specific areas in town, or fewer or more?
Thanks,
And
guys.
Thank you. Give them, name those areas. So that's sort of a task for tomorrow night. And we also have a new land acquisition checklist. So how you go through, like if a property comes to the town, maybe a landowner comes, or we proactive, and we have a checklist. And so it lists all the various components it could have. It could have ag land, it could have wildlife habitat, it could be in a floodplain, it could have wetlands. All the criteria you could think about. And does it have any funding leverage, various things. So it's a new checklist that the extension and Fish and Game helped us craft that. So we have a final draft, another draft. And we actually have at least one project that's getting presented tomorrow night, so we can actually use that to see how it works. It's just a very simple tool, actually. And then, so I think our goal is we have to submit a draft of the open space plan, do a grantor?
Yep,
at
so,
some point?
because of grant applications, we'll probably have something drafted, with the understanding that there'll be more work done, but essentially, a good chunk of it already. We'll probably present it to the planning board, rather, and also conservation, so, by the end of this month, we'll have like a draft, but with the idea that, we'll still have to work on it, so.
It's basically a description of the town, the different things we have. And so sort of the meat of it is really what do you do with all that information, which is identifying focus areas. So that's still kind of an important thing we have to do. And then that would go eventually to the planning board. So
So you're
Yeah.
hoping to get those to the commission and the board by the end of May?
Yes.
Okay. So
That's
you,
the idea. It was still, with the idea that still has to be worked on, but we still have a
Yeah.
draft to review and maybe add some comments.
so it's your team meeting tomorrow night, not Concord?
Correct.
well, it's the Conservation Commission meeting.
Oh,
and we
because
always,
this
we
is
have
your
we always
project.
have a component of the
Of
master
that,
plan. Yeah,
okay,
our
great.
meetings are going long. We have a
Well,
lot,
thank you
lot going
for
on.
your service.
Yeah, it's yeah, well. I'll say no more.
Okay. We'll switch over.
Great, I think last is energy. I know you guys came up with questions.
Yep,
Yeah.
for the questions, so, I mean, we didn't really work on anything but that last time, that was the entire meeting focus. I don't know if there's anything else that we're,
No, I think right now a lot of the chapters we're just working to put together those questions and then
Yeah.
we can build off those.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
And
thank you.
We didn't talk about a date. What's the goal of getting the survey?
Oh,
Oh.
for the questions? Yeah, so end of May, finalize. And
Okay.
then hopefully
Wow.
June 1,
Yowza.
get it out so it'll run for a month. So we'll get
Okay.
it before the July 4th.
Okay. Well,
So,
Are we meeting again before that?
no, so everything will be email communication, direct message me only, please, so you don't commit a quorum violation. So, unfortunately, we could always schedule a special meeting if you wish, but, let's see, conservation, planning board will meet, so maybe we can have some input there as well. And then maybe, if we have time, we can talk about it tomorrow. Probably not. And I'll just reach out to you all individually, and again, if you have questions, or just send them to me, and we can work them out with the commission and everything. I don't know if everyone knows, but there was a new commission established, Transportation Commission here in town. So right now it's just one counselor, Simba Dornblut, and then Lindsay Butler, I think she's still on here, and then myself, we're staffing it. So we're eventually we're recruiting right now, so anyone who wants to be on it, you're more than welcome.
When will you be meeting?
Once a month. We're trying to find a date, probably be towards the end of the month.
There was a committee prior, correct? It wasn't a commission, it was just for parking.
Yeah.
So you're reaching out to those members?
Yeah, so we're starting to do that. So we're
Okay.
trying to, ping interest, ping people to see if they're interested in it, and because they have to be applied to council. They have to be appointed, so.
When is the planning board meeting?
Next Tuesday.
So yeah, so that's actually going to be rescheduled.
Oh,
I don't have anything because the main focus of the planning board meeting, the next one is the rezoning effort on North Main Street.
Okay.
So we're going to have a draft of that and start going over that. So the majority of that time will be spent on that.
So did you say, that? Sorry, I'm sort of jumping back to the open space plan, that you want the planning board to see that at their next meeting? Because we won't have it ready by then.
Right.
no.
So the draft.
Okay, the draft,
Yeah.
okay.
Just contractually, a draft needs to be submitted,
And
no
so
action taken.
when are you
on it.
rescheduling that for?
The end of the month.
Okay, thank
Probably
you.
28.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
But we.
No, your
I think-
draft needs to be completed by a certain date under the funding.
Right,
right?
so I think the way, how it is right now, it's almost there, I think, or at least the draft.
It doesn't matter when it comes before the planning board. Yeah, wishful thinking, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
No, he thinks,
Oh.
I don't think it's done.
But,
I don't think
no,
it's
you,
done, I'm
but,
just saying,
but your point is you have a contractual obligation, right?
that's correct, so,
And what's that date?
the 31st.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I thought you were saying next Tuesday. I was like, no way.
No, it doesn't have to come to the
Goes my
planning
weekend
board
again.
by
That's
31st.
why I was talking about the rescheduling of the planning board meeting
Yeah.
for the end of the month.
All right, thank you, sorry for that.
Okay, do we have anyone here from community facilities? Have they even met?
We are, yeah.
Jane,
so
you're on
it
that
has
committee?
We don't have a committee really, right now it's just
Okay.
me and Lindsay
Okay.
and the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, Lisa Murphy. She's reaching out to different department heads
Okay.
right now to, survey them, and have questions, so she'll be she's gathering information right now.
Okay. Downtown Riverfront?
Downtown Riverfront, they didn't meet this month, Riverfront Advisory Committee, but we'll reach out to them. But if anyone has any questions on that, would like to see some sort of question there.
You're still on track,
Yeah.
still on track to have a charrette though about the riverfront in the fall, so should that be somehow in there?
Yeah,
Mention?
I'm not sure how to incorporate that, but,
Yeah.
because I believe we willing to attend a shred that's planned on October 18th, 19th. But,
How excited would you be?
we do have a planned charrette, design charrette scheduled for 18th, 19th of October.
For the downtown
For the
Riverfront?
Downtown Riverfront specifically.
Okay.
So
Arts, culture, historic resources?
they are developing survey questions as well, and they're reaching out to stakeholders to, it's kind of similar to what the housing team has been doing, is interviewing them, interviewing experts and local experts and regional experts on the state of art, tourism, and how to promote it and expand it, and learn from it, challenges in the region. So they're doing that right now as well, and also developing those survey questions too.
Recreation? Is that an active
Yeah, we
committee?
don't have a team yet for that.
Okay.
Like I said, working with
Yeah.
Amy, we'll work with maybe with you, Phil, with with the school district.
Yeah,
Just
so
take questions.
I'm sure we can talk to Todd.
Yeah, I'm not sure, maybe the next board meeting too, then,
I'll bring it up.
great.
Would there be someone from the senior center or?
Yeah, Amy will be in tune there.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And then the different kind of athletic type organizations, right?
Yeah.
That
And there's
are
so many
kinda
athletic
outside.
associations.
So,
Yeah,
Yes.
soccer,
Yeah.
baseball, yeah.
all right, great.
I think when we originally talked about it was gonna be, the conservation was gonna, commission was gonna somehow help that, but I think it should be its own
Yeah, I think so.
committee, because we're kind of burned out. Sorry, I mean, we need to move on to some other stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot, yeah,
Yeah,
us to
no,
take
I
on.
think we got a lot of our
Yeah.
data from the last survey.
Yeah.
But I think there can be some synergy, conservation shades in some of these questions as well.
Yeah, no, I just mean in terms of the recreation chapter,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
that-
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah,
no,
that's what I
the
meant.
separate
Amy
kind
and
of
others-
team
A
on
separate,
that.
yeah,
That team will be spearheaded on
Yeah.
the commission.
okay.
I think Val has a really, like, the school's not the point of entry to those other athletic associations in the community. So I think we need to find, like, whoever's leading.
who are those
Mark Fortier
people?
at one point was doing it, but like, I don't know who's doing it now, like baseball, basketball. Kevin Flewitt, I think,
Yeah,
would be baseball.
well, I think Amy will really know who all those people are.
Okay.
Because they'd have to get permits
They're
to use the
using the
park.
town
Yeah,
different
yeah.
fields
They're
that
all-
the town maintains,
Right.
so, but as long as they can be incorporated in.
I think Amy's going to be a valuable resource,
Okay.
with us, get those people and understand the questions that we need to ask.
They're gonna have unique viewpoints on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so anyone watching in the public, reach out to Bart if you know who those people are.
Does recreation also consider like community events, like, I don't know, whatever annual event is left these days?
That was gonna fall into arts culture.
Okay.
Make that-
Yeah.
But there are, well, there's a half marathon that takes place in Newmarket, at least one
Right.
large. But I was actually gonna ask Ellen too, is your survey anticipate asking questions about recreational use of open space? Because that's.
Well, that was in the original
Yeah, you're
space
beyond-
survey.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's in the original
Yeah.
one, okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure that was.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
surveys for open space and housing have already occurred.
Okay.
Correct.
Transportation, is that an active committee or just the
It's
update that there's a
it's just
commission?
established, so,
And the
so it's-
commission will be that committee?
So we would be working, me, Simca, and Lindsay be working on that with Colin
Okay.
at SRPC to develop questions, and then together we'll try to find those other folks, those stakeholders that may want to ask, have input in those questions. And that question
I'd
will-
be
And
interested in
did-
that committee.
Okay.
I-
Sylvia, you want me in on that?
Yeah, and I think our first meeting, we had
Transportation?
assigned different
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
all right, so I'll follow up with logistics.
Yeah, because I haven't been able to do anything with the arts and culture because they meet at times that I can't
Yeah.
meet.
Okay, great. But I think like for the team aspect, we can work
Mm-hmm.
right away. And if you want to actually be on the, the committee itself,
Right.
then we can go through that process.
and in economic development, we haven't actually had any kind of team meeting.
Not yet, no, but we shall.
All right, and then that team will also gonna reach out to maybe Main Street and
Yeah,
NCDC?
so me and you should talk offline
Okay,
and who we
perfect.
think that team should be.
And,
report
and,
back.
and people here, anyone that wants to jump into that team. I know you don't have enough teams. That happens when you retire.
How many teams do
You
you
had to
want
be
me
a
on?
team player.
Holy smokes.
Does anyone, economic development, anyone else want to be on that? Sure, I'll do that one.
Great, Patrick, thanks. Okay, anything else on team updates, Bart?
I think that's. So, thank you.
So
Okay,
you'll be sending us, Bart, this draft in Word?
Yes.
I'll have you.
It's okay, and just, this was just, like Kyle says, kind of conversation driver.
Yeah,
It
no.
wasn't,
Mhm.
yeah, it was just really to help us kickstart the process.
And it did its job.
There we go, like that. All right.
and then, okay, schedule and discussing, agenda items for June.
So I think we'll have that baseline data for the community.
Okay,
quizzes
so
at
that would
point, so
pretty
that
much
should
be
a
our
good one.
June meeting,
What's the meeting date in June?
Usually the
second Wednesday.
I won't be
What is that?
I don't know when it is.
I'm on vacation.
I want to say June 8th. I might be
June 12th.
It's
12th.
the 12th.
Actually works for me.
June 12th. I might
Yeah,
have
That's a
my computer
standing-
with me, so if there is a Zoom.
okay.
So I
Oh, I
think
didn't
we,
even ask, was anybody, do we have anyone in on Zoom?
It's Lindsay.
Oh, hey Lindsay, thank you for joining.
I'm not sure if she can hear us. I'm still trying to
Okay.
figure this out.
All right.
She's sitting on that meeting.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
But,
She looks pale.
Yeah.
It's very pale.
Sorry about that.
It's the best.
Okay. All right.
So
We
we
should make sure that's in the agenda, like attendees. So we can make sure we're accounting for anybody joining by Zoom, so I apologize,
Yeah,
Lindsay.
Yeah, it's just Lindsay, yeah.
Okay. Not just Lindsay.
No, it's Jen,
Yeah.
the person running the Zoom,
Okay.
and the TV.
I'm
Lindsay.
teasing you,
there you
but,
go.
so that will be the focus of the June meeting, I think, right?
I think
Yeah.
that, and then we'll have preliminary results on the survey, 'cause by that time, it will be published.
Okay.
Oh,
So we
that's
really
good.
want
See at
to
least
wrap
how many
up this,
people have-
Wow.
they want to get this out by the end of the month,
Yeah,
so.
how many people
Okay.
have responded at least.
Are you gonna have new postcards that we need to distribute, or?
Well, with the budget, but I think that's a good idea, because something I didn't really bring up was, because kind of a parallel track here is that rezoning effort on North Main Street. We had a good response, for participation. So really what we did was we went to the mill space. We had a 2-day event, so we can, accommodate for people's schedules, and basically we just did exercises on, what type of building types they like to see in their neighborhood potentially or not. And we got 60 participants out of 195.
Oh, that's good.
Hey.
And how we notice it was postcards.
To the property owners
Property
within the
owners, yeah,
potential district.
Yeah,
in this potential rezoning area.
I mean, I'm happy to help distribute
Okay,
if you're gonna do those where we just bring them to different places.
correct, yeah, right. So yeah, kind of similar to last time with the, what we did last time.
Yeah, yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah, yep, great, thank you.
We have a member of the public here. Gary, any questions for the master plan committee up here, or
I'd like to just make
come on up and,
today, this morning, I happened to be riding by, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Gary Master, out of 15 Carolyn Drive.
thank you.
But this morning I was riding by and I noticed they were tearing down the depot. And with it down there, you can see the other depot on the other side, pretty visible. And I remember when I was younger, where there were 2 railroad tracks going through town, northbound and southbound. But anyways, so looking at the other depot, you can see it here. I believe that the same person, Ben, might own both depots. I'm not sure, but I thought I heard him.
Oh.
I mean, the Rockingham station one?
No, the one that was owned by, the Selectwood people. They still own it.
Oh, I thought it might have been the same developer. But anyways, looking at the other depot, something in the future, it would look nice if that was ever developed in the future into maybe a restaurant or a coffee shop or something. But just my thoughts today, just looking at it, something down the road. And the other point that I wanted to make is in regards to the mills, the Schindler properties, in the future, it's going to be sold. They'll get older, we go, whenever our time is. But my thought, and just something, a thought I had, was with the Timberlane mills, been developed years ago, and that's all condos, which you have an ownership in all the condos. But down the road, 10 years, 20 years, I know here from Timber, 65 years old. If a family member doesn't take his business over, just like the Cheney companies, Walter Cheney's two sons would run his business. If it wasn't for his 2 sons, he would have sold his business. But I hope in the future that if the Chinburg properties is sold, you're talking over 1,000 apartments. So you're talking about a very large corporate landlord. So I'm hoping in the future, if it is sold, it could be sold as condos. This way here, you got 112 apartments, you have 112 condos, so everybody has an ownership. Where if you have a corporate landlord, and you're talking the size, and he has a big stake in Newmarket built. So with a corporate landlord, it's companies that look at Newmarket on the video screen, that's it.
Yeah.
So, just a thought I had, something.
It's a good point from the housing, from some of our discussions. One thing that Newmarket has really going for us versus say like maybe, I don't want to say Durham because they do have a local
happening in
landlord, but
Durham.
it's happening. But it's different when you have local people owning the rental properties. And we're pretty fortunate about that we don't have any corporate landlords here. To just answer your question, when that was all approved and when it was built out, there's nothing prohibiting him from condominiumizing it, coming to the planning board to do that. That's still in the books. And then they were built to condo specs, so that's certainly, it had to be rentals for a certain period of time just because of the financing. But yeah, he can condominiumize it after that particular criteria is met, I would say.
But anyway, just a thought I had, something in the future. If you look at the size of the Cheney companies, you'd have a pretty big landlord that would buy that. But the Chinburg company, you're talking about a big corporate one. And would hate to see that in town.
No, it's a good point.
I think that's an important point. Zoning can make corporate investment either more attractive or less attractive. And in Colorado, it's become a real problem and loss of sense of community. And then the municipal employees in the town I worked in, nobody lives in town.
Right.
Nobody cares about the town anymore. It's just a job. It's no longer, something you really feel custodial about. They're essentially 4 big corporate landlords that own that entire town, and they've driven the rents up so high that everyone's moved out of town and they just commute in for their job.
Yep. Yeah, you see that now in Atlanta too.
And then you have the big
Because it's-
corporations, they'll own it for 5 years, and look at their portfolio, they'll sell it, and there'll be another corporate land that they'll buy, so.
Well, they always squeeze in everybody for the highest rent possible, just to make the cap rate look good.
Yeah, whereas in the future, if they did go into condos, and then everybody has their own estate, it's much better situation. Just an idea.
Yeah, and something that we can pull forward in the housing, to your point, right? If we have any kind of zoning changes, we can take those things into consideration.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming.
And nobody ages in that town, they all just move away. Everybody just moved away.
We talked about that in the planning board, right?
Right. Any other business? All good? Take a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay. All's in favor? All right, thank you.
How's your winter been?
Over.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mail Corporation.
Yesterday,